All right, and we are live with Head Audio. I'm happy to introduce to you guys. We have Freddie, and let me just see if I can get this right. So Freddie is the founder and CEO, and we also have Klaus, who is a founder and CTO. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. From Head Audio, and so this is, the internet is clearly not working. So
The stream is started. Let me know when it's up. Okay, perfect. There we go.
yours is up.
Yep,
Okay.
up and running. Good to go.
We just
Sorry, the joys of working from home and having internet
Yes.
issues,
Yeah.
right? All right. So we should be good to
there
go
it is.
now.
Now I actually see you, Andrew.
Yes. Anyways, as I was saying before this the hiccup happened here, there's actually a storm going on outside my place, so this is one of those cases where it's kind of out of our control. So yeah, as I was saying, we have Klaus and Freddie here from Head Audio, and we're going to be doing an interview with these guys, asking them some questions about the headphone and the air motion transformer and all of this. We'll be doing the giveaway near the end of the stream, and then we're going to get to some Q&A after that. So without further ado, I just want to welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us, both Klaus and Freddie. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you guys on.
Thank you very much.
I want to start this off by asking you guys, what's sort of the backstory behind Head Audio? What's the company's sort of original relationship with the air motion transformer? And in other words, sort of who is Head Audio?
So, as you were asking from the technical point of view, I would like to start with the AMT declaration,
Sure, yeah.
And this goes back like 40 years when as a student, I came across the air motion transformer that was totally new at that point in time. And there was a speaker built in California by ESS. It was called the AMT1. And the clarity of this unit was so outstanding, and all the voice coil driven domes and cones looked bad. So I was really more than impressed. And I tried to understand the thing, which is really different from anything else I was used to. And then later on, I founded a speaker company with normal drive units, of course. But I reached out for Oscar Heil and asked him whether the kind of collaboration would be possible. There were patents at that point in time that were not expired yet. And so it needed a few more decades because I was legally able to make a different version of the AMT. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the bulky, huge original AMT design. And this was a kind of speaker that the esoteric hi-fi or audiophile scenery preferred. For a more general use, it was not very suitable. And it had a horn-like geometry in front of the diaphragm that, of course, in a way influenced and colored sound. And I looked out for a solution that could replace a dome in size and efficiency, but not in quality. It had to be better. It had to preserve the original clarity and transient capabilities of the air motion transformer design. I may make a short comment on the design itself. All other loudspeakers that you have, electrodynamic planars, electrostatic, isodynamic speakers, have one thing in common. They work with a piston-like motion to move the air in a 1-to-1 ratio. So the air motion transformer consists of a folded diaphragm where these single folds are working like this, squeezing air out and sucking it in again. So it's a nonlinear motion compared to what the piston does, but it accelerates air in a 4-to-1 ratio compared to the diaphragm velocity. So diaphragm velocity and air velocity are different in this very moment. Not the velocity of sound, of course, that stays equal for all people.
Right.
The local movement of the air to generate the sound, that is a little bit faster, or some factor of 4 times faster. And I would say, I tamed the AMT to a small dimension And I very much tried to not to have one of the many weaknesses that the esoteric designs regularly do have. A ribbon has no impedance, has a bad efficiency. A ionic tweeter makes the room smell where you're listening. For electrostatics, you need huge panels to make it reasonably working. So in all the very nice ideas that sounded different and often enough better than the voice coil driven systems, there were shortcomings. And so I managed to make a tweeter that has the normal format of a 1-inch dome that had a higher efficiency compared to the dome, where the dispersion characteristics and the distortion characteristics were on an excellent level. So this is a more general approach to replace the normal tweeter designs. And that's what Adam Audio, that I once founded actually in these rooms here, by the way, was succeeding with. The monitors and the good result they showed in the studios had to do with the resolution and the transient capabilities of the air motion transformer. And after some 14 years, like 4 years ago, I founded with Frederick together the HEDD Audio GmbH. I tried to perfection to make a more perfect tweeter even, and to do other things as well. And the other things are the ones we are talking about tonight. The tweeter has a small band in the frequency only to the small frequency band that you find with the tweeter. To have a full range unit showed some difficulties for the headphones. But in the end, we managed to introduce different geometries of the folds. It's not one kind of fold, but it's getting smaller and bigger again. So it was achieved, we could achieve a linear response from 30 hertz to 40 kilohertz. And a frequency response alone, of course, does not tell you whether you have an excellent headphone or not. The responses we have from different locations in the world show actually the freshness and again, the transient capabilities of that kind of transducer became evident and are well received.
In your guys' speaker designs, because that's what it's been before, the headphone. For the speaker designs, you guys have mainly used, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the air motion transformer has been used as in the tweeter, and then that's combined with some other transducers. What can you tell me about that and sort of I guess the combination of that?
The combination is to be done similarly to what you have to do with domes. That means you have to filter it, and you have maybe the only disadvantage AMT has is that the crossover frequency should be 2.5 kilohertz or higher. In an ideal world, and what is possible with dome tweeters, of course, 1.5 to 2 kilohertz would be preferable for a homogeneous dispersion characteristic in the mid-range. We managed to compensate for that with a kind of waveguide that you find in front of the tweeter. And it is nothing that concerns the headphone, the reproduction, because you don't have dispersion characteristics there. And so the rest is a normal blending of a good tweeter with a good woofer. It's not different in so far. One thing, of course, is different. The load for the amplifier is easier to handle because the characteristic of the high AMT, similar to planar devices, is purely resistive. There's no voice coil, no rising inductivity. The impedance is flat and it's harmless and so suitable for good reproduction.
Interesting. So, but then for the speaker designs, none of them are full range AMT. They're all AMT for above a certain frequency range. And then they use...
In my Adam Audio times, I introduced a mid-range on the high air motion principle. But that was a difficult device, if I may say so, because the lower you go, the more you are endangered with the bigger amplitudes, with distortion and efficiency problems. Because that's something I should mention, especially to explain the efficiency of the headphone. That is not ideal. It's a little bit less because you have a huge magnetic gap that you have to fill, both in my old mid-range and now in the headphone. And that means to get lots of Maxwell, you need a lot of iron and a lot of magnets. So, and that's right. We know that our headphone is a little bit heavier than other ones. And this has to do effectively with the air motion principle as such. We need
Right.
more steel and more magnets to have results.
Right. And presumably that means power as well.
These days, with all these excellent
Yeah.
amplifiers around, this is not an issue.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask about, you know, the development of the air motion transformer in the headphone specifically, and you touched on that as well. But the use of, or the idea of making it full range, I imagine is more doable in a headphone than in speakers. But where did this idea of, I mean, you said that the ability to be linear all the way down to 30, 20 hertz is a result of using a variable geometry for the folds. Where did this idea come from, or what was sort of the inspiration for this solution, I guess, for that challenge?
First of all, let me tell you, this is the most frequent question I have heard.
I'm truly sorry for that.
So inviting, of course, to put it down. But if you look what is necessary, then you arrive at geometries and weights and prices that are out of reach, and it would be unfortunately not be reasonable. Of course, I would have been more than happy to achieve it, but it's far away from realization from the technical details. If you look at what you really need in weight, in magnets, in money, it is. I wouldn't believe it really works with all these punches that a good 12-inch can do. That is, out of reach.
Right. There was something that I remember reading about when the headphone was first talked about, and people were comparing it to ribbon transducers, but it's not actually a ribbon transducer either. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about the difference between the ribbon transducer principle and for speakers? And now there is one in sort of like a ear speaker type thing, which Tyler knows about. But could you maybe explain the difference for people who are unaware about that?
First of all, I'm more than happy that you put the question on the table, because it's the most frequent confusion we have. The problem is that a ribbon tweeter consists of a pure aluminum ribbon only. After that, a lot of planar tweeters that are quite the same thing as the planar headphones have entered the market. They are called DVR tweeter in the beginning from Infinity from California. It was the German guy called Daniel von Recklinghausen, and these DVR tweeters were what you found in all the Infinity loudspeakers that some of you may be familiar with. And again, these are piston-like diaphragms. They move like a piston. And the material, the diaphragm material we use for the AMT is just the same those planar tweeter people are using, and very similar to what the planar headphone manufacturers are using. It's a classical combination. But what you do with the material is different. So we fold it, so you have acceleration in air motion. And this is nothing you have with either ribbons or planar or isodynamic speakers.
Right. So a truly unique
the material misleads people to always call it a ribbon. Please, AMT is not a ribbon.
Perfect. I remember reading as well that there was, I mean, you guys call the folds, they're called Captain folds, is that correct?
Yeah, Captain is a DuPont material that is famous in airplanes and everywhere where you need total, no stretching, no humidity problems, no fire problems, very solid and very stiff. Young's modulus is very high.
Okay. and how does the so we're getting into the technical stuff here, I guess, but how, you mentioned this briefly as well, but could you tell us a little bit how the magnet structure works for this as well? Because again, I think a lot of us are sort of used to typical planar magnetic designs or moving coil principles where, especially with planar magnetic designs and headphones, the magnet structure is it's very I don't want to say iconic, but recognizable. Is there a similarity with that, or is it totally different as well?
There's a serious difference because the planar people or designers live in a comfortable world. the two pole plates are very near to each other, so you can create a very strong field. In our case, the difference between the two pole plates is more than 6 millimeters. In a normal voice call or planar speakers, we have a millimeter or less. So the magnetic field gets very weak. So you need more magnets and a yoke to combine the front and north and south pole to get the most out of it. And still need an open structure so that the sound may go out on both sides without impediments, you know. So that is either I want a strong field or I want no magnet at all to let the sound pour in and out the way it should, you know. And so our compromise concerning the magnetic field is more difficult, much more difficult to achieve than with planar headphones.
Right, and is that also the reason why, you know, the width is what it is, right? It has to be a certain
additional millimeters that we need due to the construction of the AMT as such.
Right. That's sort of what I imagined. And I mean, so all of this coming together, you know, this technology now in headphones, you know, we can say, what would you, how would you describe the advantage over at least in maybe like subjective terms, right? For you mentioned, you know, fast transients and stuff like that, but you know, the squeezing motion, right? As far rather than the pistonic motion, what's sort of the advantage of that over you know, traditional transducer designs? As far as like, you know, what it's like to experience, is it in soundstage, is it in detail, you know, from your words, what how do you see that?
The technical aspect is it is a speedy device. That means the air is accelerated 4 times faster within the folds before the sound goes out. So this associates that it is more transient capable. It's more speedy,
snappier. Yeah.
The proof, I always emphasize the most important phrase for a speaker company or headphone company is the proof within the listening. If you look into the history of loudspeakers, you have so many nice construction with bad sound and many conventionally made speakers with excellent sound. So the different principle, a good argument for one parameter is not at all a guarantee that you have the better sound. But the more open sound and the dimensional reproduction is advantages with air motion transformers. The airy sound, is of course the motion. The airy sound normally makes a better stereophonic picture or stage for the reproduction. That's what many people find, and me myself as well.
Yeah, and me as well. But I always, to me, the most iconic thing about, or most recognizable thing about the headphone, as far as like the subjective experience goes, it's always been that it has a kind of physicality to it that you don't get from other headphones. At least I haven't experienced that from other headphones. Is this something that, I mean, it can be directly related to, or is this something that the air motion transformer is directly responsible for as well?
If I can answer it with my words, it's more vivid. The sound.
Yes, sure.
And that's in the end a credit to Oscar's principle. That's nothing I could either invent or influence. It's if you do a linear and good working transducer, it comes with it. Then you enjoy it in the end, but it is part of the principle as it seems, both for the tweeters and for the headphone as such.
Just for anybody who's wondering, Oscar is Oscar Heil. Is that?
Sorry.
Yeah, and he's the original inventor for this this technology.
I may add this a small story that I visited Oscar in he was in a small city south of San Francisco, a few miles down the 101. I was there like 7, 8 times and discussed the matter with him. He was not happy with my access because he was a fan of the dipole idea, which is not compatible with a normal speaker. And in the end, my last visit was unlucky. He was not liking the idea at all and was a little bit rude. And in the end, I have to be very grateful because my life was really changing due to his basic idea. And the patent has expired decades before, so everybody can build one per today. And he was a great physicist, by the way, as well. This one thing when he was born 06, and when he did his PhD in Göttingen, which was the capital of mathematics and physics, theoretical physics, he was with all the big guys from Heisenberg to anywhere, and he was an excellent physicist as well. But he had a lifelong speaker. He was a lifelong speaker, not just even already in the 30s, you know.
Right.
He was really a speaker guy.
What was, just out of curiosity, what was his, resistance to what you would, put forward? Or where did that, I mean, if it, at least as you said already, the proof is in the listening. But I wonder why. What would he say now if he's heard some of the head audio speakers? Right?
I think he disliked that I left the dipole thing.
Oh yes, yeah.
Logically speaking, that I did something different. That
Mm-hmm.
was the inventor. I did something different. I fear this had played a role. Yes.
Okay, but I imagine he would have, enjoyed, listening to the.
Oh,
yeah. It would be interesting to have that conversation. Now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to bring Freddie in here. I see some of you guys in the chat being like, "What about Freddie?"
Okay.
They want you to show the prototype, Freddie.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah. Well, usually I do these things in the company, and the prototype is there, unfortunately. So I only have the real thing here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask about, and I've spoken with you before about this, but with regards to tuning the headphone, and actually, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the headphone is something that you've been working on and developing prototypes for a while. And I remember I've seen some photos of like the initial prototypes and with the kind of wooden pieces where you guys are trying them out. What was the process like for tuning the headphone? Was there a specific kind of target curve you guys were looking for, or was it related to your background in musicology? What's sort of the process for that?
Well, I think both my and also my father's approach always comes from probably the background of active musicianship in a way as well, and being quite experienced listeners and visitors of concerts. And there's a certain understanding and a certain clear idea what certain instruments should sound like when they're reproduced. So very often we're going into a process of developing a product with this kind of listening experience rather than doing things over scientifically, so to say. And the beginning of the headphone was actually pretty much like a big version of the tweeter that was capable of full range reproduction. And this giant tweeter, so to say, had a very specific sound signature that we very much liked, but it was very, very uneven. It had a very majestic bass, for an example, that really blew us away, and that kind of created this click where we thought, this is actually possible. We can tame this into a really, really good sounding headphone. But then overall, the frequency response was totally uneven. And of course, we wanted to solve all these inherent problems by mechanical means, so to say. And we didn't want to come up with a DSP or an amplifier that would correct the frequency response. Obviously, we wanted to create a device that could be used by other people with their favorite amplifiers and not, chain them to something that we would have to add. So it was a lot of trial and error. It was the idea that my father mentioned of the variable folds. There are at least, I would say, 15 prototypes, somewhere between 10 and 20 prototypes, where the variable fold principle is realized in different ways, with tighter folds and middle, tighter folds outside, with less folds and more folds. And from this trial process, we learned so much about how the geometry of these folds actually influence the sounds, and where it's influencing the sound to the better and to the worse as well. And so in a way, it was, for me, I have never been a part of the whole Adam story. I was always more on the sideline because I did different things. But for me, it was a so very exciting process of true research and development, as opposed to making speakers where there's, of course, a lot of former experience and I don't know how many models my father designed over the last 20 years, but it's definitely a lot of stuff. And so it was a very, very fresh and dynamic process for all of us, full of surprises, basically. And the tuning at the end of the day is a result of obviously of looking for a flat and a neutral and an accurate representation of sound. But some of the key decisions were actually made based on our individual experience as listeners and as people who are good at, you know, interpretation of sound when it's being played through a reproduction device. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you guys have had sort of your whole lives as history of this, of all of this.
Yeah, and probably also, I mean, my father comes from a background in physics and music, and my background is more musicology and analysis of orchestral music, of chamber music, composition technique, and then I was a mastering engineer for 5 years, pretty much full time. So we listen to the same things with different kind of ears, but it's pretty remarkable that we always come to the same conclusions, or there are hardly ever profound conflicts when we go for a result, and when we actually tune devices, decide on filters, decide on crossovers and speakers. It's we're pretty close usually with what we find suitable.
Interesting. Am I correct for some reason I have it in the back of my mind that there's somebody, a watchmaker, actually making the folds. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
That's interesting. Is it just because that's the only way to do it, to ensure, you know, somebody with a steady hand is doing this, or?
Well, it's the steady hand. It's the ability of being very patient. It's the ability of working on very small scale.
Yeah.
That is also very important when you fold, because the smallest difference will have some sort of effect on the frequency response. And if you are a watchmaker, or if you come from a background in, you know, any kind of work that requires these kind of abilities, then you're probably a good fit for this kind of work as well. But nobody who starts working with us has ever done anything like that before.
Sure.
So it's quite the learning curve. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, this then means that in a way it's, you know, the transducers are handmade, right?
Yeah.
Every headphone there's a handmade, you know.
Yeah.
By hand, you know, and sealed, and you see the phone, like 20 folds or even more in the headphone. Everyone is folded separately, fixed. Next one is folded, fixed. So it's a tedious process, which is much longer than a voice call that, like, and it's ready.
Yeah, exactly.
And then also it's the whole QNC procedure is obviously very sophisticated when you build things by hand. So all the signal drivers are measured individually. Then we are matching the drivers based on the results of these measurements. Then we're assembling the headphones. Then the headphones themselves are being measured again. And then there's a listening test involved that looks out for different things and with different listening perspectives. So it's quite a tedious process that happens before we actually wrapping them up and sending them out.
Right. Yeah, I mean that it's astounding how much work, I imagine, goes into this, that, you know, you don't get to see when you just hold the end product necessarily. Yeah. But I wanted to just quickly get back to the tuning process. And a lot of people have actually been asking me how much of the tuning is influenced by the pad development and pad design.
Quite a bit. Do you want to say something about this, Dak?
Yeah, I had to learn that pads play a major role. I wasn't waiting for that. I was warned, but it has more of an influence than I had thought before. And you cannot really engineer it. You have to see what kind of influence it has, and then you have to tune the transducer to fit musically together with the pads. At that point, let me introduce our official word for it. It's called VVT. An air motion transformer transforms the velocity of air. And if you have folds that have different geometry, this transformation is different. That's why we call the whole thing, where we have a patent applied for, variable velocity transform, meaning that you have different geometry in the folds that you find in the headphone diaphragm. And that is the kind of tuning that we could do. Weighing mid-range, the mid-range was like 10, 12 dB down in the original one-to-one diaphragm that we started with. and it needed actually many steps of adaptation to have a flat frequency response, which we do have for today.
So I mean, as one might expect, it's a combination of many different parameters, but the pads as well is a significant one.
It's not zero. The problem is if you have another pad, nobody really can answer the question what kind of difference you will hear.
Yeah,
it's the case.
Well, you worry somebody's going to put different pads on at some point, or
yeah. I mean, it's very often it's a bass oriented discussion as well, because once you open the pads, once you use something more of a loose material, you're losing some of the bass frequency response. You're losing muscle and tightness in the bass. And so at the end of the day, we decided for something that is, you know, quite well sealed actually, to maintain most of this precious bass that we liked from the start. Yeah.
Right. I want to move to there's been a lot of questions about the fact that the whole transducer sits a bit farther away from the ear, and or at least the question has been, what is responsible for, as you mentioned, the very large and sort of spread out kind of soundstage, and the width that people talk about. Is it that the transducer is a little bit further away, or does that not play as significant of a role?
That's what we simply found. If you move diaphragms a little bit further from the ear, the sound, the stereophonic reproduction is the winner. That's the only reason why it gets so bulky.
I imagined as well. That was why.
We tried different things, obviously, and obviously it was also a kind of discussion between the beauty and the sound stage quality, because obviously if it would be a little more flat, a little more closer to the ear, like most headphones, it would probably look a little more appealing. But we were really obsessed with an uncompromised sound experience, and everything else was in second order to that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, is this something that I know you guys went through lots of different prototypes and whatnot, with different sizes to the cups as well. Is something that you guys are is that on the horizon for you guys at some point to make something with the air motion transformer that's smaller, or is this just a requirement for implementing the air motion transformer in headphones?
You're smiling.
Of course, that is an indication. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's if there's one thing that we learned over the last 12 to 16 months, it's that we have a real shot of becoming well-respected and good headphone manufacturer in the next years. And the first hype of the headphone and the way it sells through now in many different countries is almost like makes us almost a responsibility to do more in the future for this field. Yeah. So we're working on stuff. Yeah.
Were you guys surprised by the reception and the positive demand that you guys have? Because it seemed like, at least initially, there was a lot of people were trying to get their hands on one.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how about you, Klaus, but I was very surprised because it's like, first of all, the culture of the great headphone is not so much happening within pro audio. In the professional audio world, you have also kind of iconic headphones, but they're usually much more affordable and they're good at certain things. They are helpful tools in the process of making music and in the process of mastering and post-production. You need them at one point eventually, but there's not such a nice, vivid, dynamic culture around this sort of product like we found it in your realm, if I may say so. And we had to learn over the course of last year, we had to learn about HEDDphone. We had to learn about the culture of reviews, the forums, the obsession and the fever of people looking for the best headphones in the world. And while we were actually designing the headphone, it became more and more clear where this product is actually aiming towards. We weren't so aware of that actually before. We wanted to make the headphone nevertheless, because it's nothing is more of an ongoing, you know, painting forth a tradition, our AMT tradition, into a headphone product. Is obviously, it's the most obvious and most beautiful thing that could have happened to us. But now we see more clear where this product is actually aiming at and where the people are that are interested in it. And at this point, I would say it's 70% audiophiles and headphone geeks and people who are interested in this. And us, you guys, and your work, and then obviously the rest is pro audio. And it looks like it's going to be stronger in pro audio than we actually thought. We have a lot of inquiries from mastering engineers at the moment, from people working in home studios and sophisticated home studios, where it's not really necessary that the headphone is closed. So that's a very, very positive turn that somehow is more, you know, it's more of a real thing now for us.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to. That was going to be my next question. I mean, this seems to have, you know, generated a lot of excitement in that, you know, pro, you know, recording artist and, you know, engineering and mastering world. And even just, I'll tell the story a little bit. When we were in New York at CanJam this past year in February, before we could, you know, no longer have events and things like that, you know, we got a chance to take the headphone to a recording studio, and with, you know, with Freddie as well, and you know, have some engineers try it out, and you know, they were all very impressed, in particular with the you know, the space and localization and all of that stuff, which I imagine is something that, you know, if you're a recording engineer or mastering engineer or something, you know, in that world, and you don't always have the luxury of having your speaker set up with you, you know, the headphone would be a suitable alternative to that, because, you know, you're able to, you know, do the you know, stereo imaging a little bit better than, you know, something that's really, really tight. So that was interesting to see. And I mean, like you said now, I mean, it wasn't necessarily something you were initially anticipating it being as popular for, but now you guys are you know, seeing that's where a lot of the demand is coming from, which is it's fascinating. So the feedback's been good from all of those groups as well. But I wanted to ask about the power requirements for the headphone, because one of the things, I mean, as you guys mentioned, there's a lot of amplifiers these days out there where, you know, even the less expensive amplifiers are getting more and more powerful and able to drive headphones, you know, the headphone. But I think, Klaus, you mentioned at some point in a stream that I watched that the headphone can make use of up to 5 watts. Is this something you'd be able to talk more about? Or, because I think a lot of people are trying to not so much figure out what's, you know, minimally requirement, but maybe rather what's optimal.
There are 2 limitations for the max power consideration: heat and amplitude. And from the heat point of view, there is more possible than 5 watts, 10 to 15, or something in between. However, if you put that much power to the unit, then the folds will crash with each other, and there's no more music, there's noise only. So,
right.
But 5 watt is a very will not destroy the unit. That's the message. And how loud you play and how many low frequencies you do have that limit the maximum loudness, of course, that's up to the music and to you. But from the heat, from burning the unit, you can say 5 watts is just fine.
But nobody's going to be listening that loud to the point.
I hope not.
Yeah. I mean, do you guys have a favorite amplifier that you're constantly testing? We've gone through so many different ones. I'm using the Phonitor here right now, but you know, we've, as part of the giveaway, we're doing the IHA 6 from Cayenne. So like, there's a lot of different stuff that people are trying it on. I mean, just wondering what you guys' take is on, you know, source pairing.
So we've been working with various companies over the last 1.5 years. There's the obvious ones, the German pro audio companies that we're quite close friends with. So one is RME, for an example. They have the ADI Pro, which is a gorgeous device in any possible way and drives the headphone just fine. Really, really great match in our opinion. And we also have RME audio interfaces in our lab, for an example, to do speaker testing and these kind of things.
And that's not just the DAC, sorry, that's the Pro, like RME ADI2 Pro unit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's actually the Pro unit. So it's yeah, the DAC alone would do the job for most headphone users potentially. I think it's the same chip. And then there is SPL also with the Phonitor line.
Yep.
We have a bunch of those that we use for, when we travel. And we've been hooked up by cord with various devices that also we have good experiences with. But we are not overly, I mean, I would say that a lot of brands that you guys probably know inside out have been, have crossed our paths yet. So
okay.
actually something we are quite interested in. Yeah.
Right. So there's a little bit of exploration there as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is brand new technology. So everybody's trying to figure out what the best sort of pairing is there.
Yeah. And then also, especially within Europe, we at the moment, we are trying to build like little mobile setups for the headphones. So we have like 4, 5, 6 devices in like in a box with the headphone and the amp and the cable. So we can easily hook up people for demos, because so many people actually want to listen to the headphone now, and we feel very encouraged to make that easier for our partners and for ourselves as well. Yeah.
Right. Do you think the power requirements, this is just sort of a question about the industry in general, because well, 2 questions on this, but as you guys as we've talked, the headphone's been very popular in the pro audio scene, and but one of the things that I think about with this is, there's a lot of headphones that do get developed for the pro audio scene that are a little bit more efficient. They're not, as they don't require the 1 watt or whatever it is. And I'm just wondering, do you think that the power requirements question is a potential, I don't want to say barrier, but is that an obstacle that you guys, or a challenge that you guys have to overcome with the pro audio crowd, or is that not a problem at all?
No, it's absolutely a problem. You have to imagine that most engineers, even on the highest level of engineering, are not used to working with separate dedicated headphone amplifiers.
Right.
Very often they would use the output of their audio interface. They would use the output of a mixing console, for an example, and these devices never really matched the quality and the flexibility and sound of a dedicated device. And so that's actually, there's definitely some teaching or educating involved. We've sold just like 2-3 months ago, we sold 2 headphones to a producer crew within Berlin that do a lot of mainstream huge hip hop records with millions of sales actually, and they are working with little universal audio interfaces. And those you actually have to crank them up to the max in order to have like a moderate listening experience, and then still you only get probably 60-70% of what the headphone could sound like. So there's definitely some education involved and that's one of the reasons why, if we hook up someone that we find interesting, that we want to push for the brand, then it's usually advisable to hook them up with an amp as well to test.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we did that as well. Make sure it's the right setup. I have a couple more questions for you, and then we'll maybe get to the giveaway. But my question's about the look and the aesthetic design, and it seems to me, at least, and I don't know if this is intentional, but it seems to me that even just the look of the Air Motion Transformer, you can see it in the in your on the headphone there. That look is now becoming, again, I'm going to use the word iconic. It's becoming recognizable, and there is something aesthetically interesting about it. And I wonder, I mean, was this something you guys were consciously thinking about when developing the headphone? That, I mean, apart from that, with the grill and everything, there's almost sort of like a no nonsense, all about the sound quality kind of vibe that the headphone has, and as opposed to the super fancy flashy looking stuff that you see, there's like one behind me there, very, very fancy looking, and with HEDD it seems a little bit more, let's say, understated and more matter of fact. This is an air motion transformer. That's kind of what the statement is to me. Was this at all something that was intentional, or were you guys thinking about this, or is this just how this happened to come into fruition?
Yeah. Do you want to start?
Yeah, maybe, because the answer is more simple. These were our first headphones.
Fair enough.
All the wonderful manufacturing skills, experiences, companies were not at hand. And I have a preference for a clear and simple design that lasts more than for gimmicks and wonderful surfaces. For future models, I will not exclude to be more attractive to the average buyer. That is not, but this was just the idea and the optimum in sound, regardless of bulkiness, weight, and price.
I mean, there's obviously, maybe just to add that, obviously if you have something unique, then it's advisable to find a way to make this visual as well. So bringing out the folds and making them actually viewable from the outside was a big goal for us. At the same time, we had many discussions. Should this headphone be round like pretty much any other headphone, or should it have a different outer shape? And could the shape be oriented to some extent? Kind of, could there be a connection to the actual head logo? So there's a connection between the head logo and the outer shape of the headphone as well that played a vital role for us when we decided on the geometries of the case, basically. So those two aspects were very important for us.
And as Klaus mentioned, I mean, this is your first headphone. Does that mean that we can, in the future, there's something to? Or I guess a better question would be, how long did it take you guys to develop this one? And are you expecting a similar, research and development process for the next thing that you guys do in the headphone world?
It was pretty much 1 year of intense work. Winter 18-19, the idea became clear, and then the first tests were performed around spring, and then we consciously decided to bring a prototype to the Munich High-End Show because we were aware we wanted feedback from the outside world. We wanted to step out of our very small circle and meet and talk to people who actually are experienced in whatever way with this market, with these sort of products. And so that was a very interesting learning for us as well. And then the actual first headphones were shipped around December, I think January 2020. So one year of dedication. Yeah.
Does it mean a year and a half approximately?
A little less than that, I would say. Yeah.
So and
the first one is the most difficult one, probably.
I was so I was going to ask that. I mean, would we expect a similar time gap? Or I mean, I'd also want to wonder, like, this was a fairly high-end, audiophile, device that a lot of us are excited about. I mean, but are there other sort of, price segments that you guys are interested in, targeting with headphones, or are you looking more at the high-end stuff? Are you looking more at I guess me, like the people like me?
Well, I would say that.
Couldn't we just say it's a bi-directional answer?
Yes, exactly.
No, I mean, we are well aware that this headphone has a beautiful but very limited use. It's not for people recording. It's not for people stepping outside of their house. It's not for people who are on a budget. I mean, there are all sorts of aspects that this headphone doesn't really match in a way. It's beautiful for people who sit down and actually really want to dive into a record and listen and experience, and with the kind of patience and the kind of sophistication. But any headphone that we would work on and would put out next would have to, go more towards a different direction and would have to broaden our audience in some extent as well. So I wouldn't really want to put out something that is the same but changed ever so slightly, but it would be more something to reach out to different audiences that are already interested in us as well. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, that basically exhausts all the questions that I have for you guys for now. I'm sure. I mean, we could have talk about this for a long time, but I want to ask. Well, first, actually, before we do the giveaway, Tyler, did you have any additional questions for these folks, or should we get the giveaway going?
I think we could just get into the giveaway. I think, I mean, honestly, you've been nailing all the questions I would have had. I'm usually more into like the subjective and designy type stuff, and getting into the music part, which Frederick already kind of nailed. So I don't really. I think we're good. We can jump right in, and then after that we can jump into the questions. I have a couple that I've been pulling. So
cool.
All right, let's do the giveaway now. So just so you guys know, if you're signing up after this, I'm sorry, it won't be pulled. So everybody up until now is being entered. And so we are entering into the random selection. And the winner is, you guys ready for this?
I'm excited.
All right, I have no idea how to say this name, but it's Petar Kavelj. Petar Kavelj. We will be in touch with you, and we'll send you an email. And then, so you've won the headphone, you've won the Kayan IHA6 amplifier, which is on the desk behind me, and then you've also won the Topping E30 DAC, just so that you can get up and running with this. So that's a complete head audio system. You are up and running. Congratulations, Petar.
Really, really badass setup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting.
Very, very cool.
All right. Well, on that note, we have questions from the chat. Tyler, did you want to? I'll let you select them.
Yeah. So first couple, I have a couple of basic ones. Is when designing the headphone, what amplifier sources, which you kind of already nailed, were the specific amp gold standard, which you already talked about. So from that, they wanted to know what the DAC used, which you kind of nailed with the RME. But is there any others in that realm? Like, so to tie that together, what were I'm gonna convert this into my own question, I guess. What were your guys' favorite pairings for DAC and amp with the headphone? Sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there are differences in taste between the companies that I mentioned before, and you could probably say that an RME sounds a little bit brighter and a little bit more brilliant than an SPL phonitor or something. They both work really well with the headphone, I would say. But in terms of pure conversion quality, I wouldn't really be able to tell you this is much better than that, at least not in between the companies that we've been listening to the headphone with.
Gotcha. And more in the sense of like what would be, I guess, well, actually, that's fair enough. We can jump to the next one. I think
well, actually, just on that subject, I mean, you guys have, you mentioned that you've taken it to the Munich high end, and obviously you've taken it to CanJam, the headphone that is. You have any amp manufacturers, asked, hey, could we try this out on our system? Because that's one of the things I do notice, or I'm just remembering from going to that event, is that everybody in the community is very excited to try different things with different things, right? So is there anything that have you had any of that kind of request?
We had requests, but they were more from the pro audio industry.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. Because I mean, pro audio needs conversion on a day-to-day basis as well. So the simple DAC model is something you would find in both these worlds.
Right. Fair enough. Anything else, Tyler?
Yeah, I have a couple here. We can do a couple quick fire ones. This got a little controversial, but it goes into the build of the headphones. And was there a limitation to the way that these extended? Like, how was that? Was that a factor?
Oh yeah, you guys changed the arm length, right?
And is there a way to make it even longer, or is there a limitation now with that, or is that something?
So the first few batches, we got feedback on those by people saying, you know, my head is really big. It feels a little cramped. Like, could you guys do anything about this?
Mm-hmm.
And it was approximately, my guess would be approximately 5% of people that had bought the headphone. So, but at one point it reached the forums and it became kind of a headband gate kind of situation.
Yeah.
And then of course we looked into it because this was a remarkable feedback, and we looked at it not with the idea of redesigning anything profoundly, but could there be anything we could do in order to make it a little longer with the means that we already have. And then we started to work on this, and at the end of the day we found a very simple way to extend the headband by, I think it's roughly 0.8 millimeters. Yeah, 0.8 millimeters, I think, per side. So it doesn't really sound like a huge step up, but it's actually more than enough now, because these problems have almost disappeared in the feedback we get from people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I found a somewhat technical question, maybe for Klaus. The diaphragm thickness. Somebody's asking about the diaphragm thickness, because this is something that often gets talked about with planar magnetic design principles as well. So that'd be something interesting to know about as well.
Are you asking for the material, for the diaphragm material?
I think that's what they're asking about, for the thickness of the material and whether or not that plays a role in the overall sound quality and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Something a little bit special about the diaphragm is the fact that the aluminum is not connected with a glue to the Kapton folio, but that the both folios are pressed together with heat and pressure in a way so that they are connected. With the glue in between, if you etch the stuff, you would have incorrect results on the edges, And to have a constant impedance from piece to piece, that needs a special material combination, Kapton and aluminum, physically pressed together with heat, so that it's the kind of laminate that we can start with to make the diaphragm. The Kapton is like 10, 11 mus if you have that value, and the aluminum is like 20 mus. Mus, what do you pronounce it? Micro.
Yeah. MUs.
MUs.
Yeah, I got it. So this is different from, I think a lot of the time with, again, the reference for audiophiles is with this kind of stuff is often planar magnetic transducers, because that's, that's all we really know. Maybe electrostatic as well, but where the conversation often revolves around diaphragm thickness and nanometer thickness and that kind of stuff, because that's I guess common vernacular for this kind of stuff. But what you're saying is that it's a different kind of thing entirely with the air motion transformer for the diaphragm in general.
I have the following: in a planar device, the weight of the diaphragm actually is the limiting factor for frequency band. Mass reduces the response, so make it light is what's most important with planar devices. In our case, we have we have a transformation. Like if you press something together, and if the air is light, then it's not a problem if your hand is a little bit stiffer but has more power. So we concentrate on this power and 1 to 4 factor more than to have it as light as possible. And in the end, the result is what counts. Yeah.
Right. Great. So let's see. Anything else jump out? Yeah.
I have like 10 questions.
Okay. Sorry to keep you guys.
So the another one was a kind of interesting one was, could any of this technology be utilized in an IEM? Is there a way to make this into maybe a one tiny little fold into an IEM? That would be, I don't know how that would work, but what are your thoughts on that? In the AMT driver in a IEM housing, seems pretty nuts. But
or even those ones, like the i3 and i4 that are outside the ear but still are in ear, in a way.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody asked a question before. Yeah. Somebody.
Yeah.
I think it's simply impossible to have an in-ear device as such with an AMT.
Mm-hmm.
And this special solution, I think it's from Odis with these outer
Yes. Yeah.
thing, which looks weird to me, at least. Something maybe could be achieved, but I doubt whether it makes sense to make such a product.
Right.
Yeah. Another one was, and forgive me if you guys already answered this, but it's a quick one, is options for a closed back. Is that anything that's thought about at all? Seems like that was one of the ones that kind of kept popping up.
Yeah.
For me, the sound of closed up headphones is not an invitation.
Fair. Roger that. And then people kept asking about this. There's a couple ones that kind of similar questions, so I'm going to ask them together. It's how well are the drivers matched, and how do you test for consistency?
Yeah.
As Frederick mentioned already, we measure each and every transducer the moment it is made.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the transducers are mounted into the final headphone, we measure it again. And we do a matching process in front of it. So we have a plus minus 1 dB approximately similarity between the units. And it should be mentioned that irregularities in the frequency response in dBs, like 1 or 2 dBs, are much less hearable compared to loudspeakers. I had to learn how little of what
The
important
variances are...
linear frequency response is not available with headphones. You know this from all the measurements.
Mm-hmm.
Another truth is that tolerances and frequency response are less important compared to speakers, considerably less important from our hearing experience, at least.
Yeah.
Okay.
We actually created our own matching kind of software.
That's cool.
To really have something that is individual suited to our product.
Very cool. And go ahead, Klaus. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, Klaus.
Next question.
Next question. This is actually kind of get a little more into the fun stuff. Well, there's two before that fun stuff, but balance versus single-ended cable connection. Was that already talked about a little bit? But like, what's the take on that? Is there any? I mean, to me, it's just you get more power and you get a little bit of cleaner like sound.
It's one little change because the source impedance of a headphone amplifier, who is driven symmetrically, is different from the one that is non-symmetrically. However, most of the headphones, especially the planar ones and ours, are flat resistive loads, and so this is very similar for an amplifier. To have a RISA to be driven is a relatively easy task. And yet I have to admit, I thought it sounds better with a symmetrical cable. Although from a technical point of view, I have to refuse this. There were small listening experiences, very small ones, that let me think about it. And of course, we will always have symmetrical connectors for that case.
Yeah.
Symmetrical being, what we think of as balanced, right?
Yeah, exactly.
As well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
There was some, in theory, I mean, would somebody be able to use a different cable, like a balanced cable, or would they have to get the official one from you guys? Doesn't matter.
It's normalized, and you can use it with all the different.
Perfect. That was an important question a lot of people had.
Yeah.
I'm actually using a balanced aftermarket right now with them.
I'm using the official stock.
One fun one. This is what was your sample music while demoing and tuning the headphones?
That's a good
or did
one.
you have a specific type of music that you would lean more towards?
Well, we have a very, very well-chosen selection of probably 8 to 10 tracks that we always rely on for the headphone as well as for the speakers. And that's a pretty wild mix between genres and recording aesthetics and stuff. But I would say that at the end of the day, we are always, for the serious process of decision-making, filtering, massaging, frequency response, we usually rely on acoustic material. just because it's much easier for us to judge
Mhm.
whether a drum set or a piano or, you know, like a violin sounds authentic in our ears. It's much easier to actually have a proper discussion about this, you know, as opposed to comparing, you know, 808 drum sounds or electronic music where you don't really have a clear understanding what the source is like, what the source like should sound like. So there's a lot of acoustic music involved, lots of classical music, also chamber music, to also very good for talking about the spatial properties of a device we would work on. And then obviously in the process of QC, for an example, there are some pretty, you know, tortureful electronic tracks that really trigger the headphone at a very low point in order to look for, you know, where is the physical boundary, where's the mechanical border of the device, and if you want to find little problems in a headphone, it's usually really good to feed it with, you know, very low, probably sub bass, you know, oriented material, so that we have some stuff there as well. But yeah,
I'm gonna have to remember to use the term tortureful electronic tracks in the future. But it's interesting you mentioned it, because it's you know, it makes a lot of sense. This is one of the reasons why I tend to gravitate more towards that kind of music as well. It's because, at least for evaluations, because I have a reference point for what that stuff's supposed to sound like, you know, in real life.
Exactly. Yeah, this is not a statement on our individual musical tastes, obviously, but it's very crucial for the actual R&D process.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, real quick, someone asked preferences, or they asked, do you guys love electronic music, and can it test limitations of the headphones and treble extension?
Well, I think Chris likes electronic music.
Yeah. Hi, Chris.
He's probably watching.
Chris has been in vinyl distribution for a long time, actually. So he has a lot of connections in the UK electronic music scene. But I mean, yeah, we're from Berlin, so there's some natural playground here for us. We're very close with companies like Native Instruments and Ableton that, you know, design devices for music production and for people who are more into the electronic music side of things. There's a pretty strong hip hop scene here as well, and so I personally I'm very much in this realm as well, and I would say that probably 50 to 60% of customers that bought our speakers, our monitors, are actually somewhere in this world, and we have a strong scene in drum and bass, we have a strong scene in hip hop. We have a lot of ambient musicians that work based on electronic material. So it's definitely quite a strong field for us. Yeah.
I have one quick question about source pairings to go back. Have you guys tried the headphone with any tube amplifiers, or is this something anybody have you heard of anybody trying this out?
I did, yeah.
I know Tyler does, but I just wanted to get your guys' take on you know, pairing, you know, with a tube amplifier versus pairing with a solid state, and, you know, do you have a preference, or what's your thought on that?
Well, I personally mostly prefer solid amps because they maintain more of the cleanliness and the you know, jumpiness of the original headphone like we imagine it. But I've listened, I think, to one you know, this crazy Manley device where you can tweak all sorts of troop related components, and that one actually sounded pretty good on it. But at the same time, it adds something that makes the headphone just not sound like the headphone we had in mind, but still people might really enjoy this. It brings in some warmth, some crunchiness, some spacious, more like of a spacious sound, like in the lower frequency range. That is probably really, really good for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yep. Well, that I think exhausts all of my questions. Tyler, how are we doing? We're coming near the end of the stream here because we've been over an hour. So
yeah, no worries. Yeah, we can crank it out. But the last one I saw in here was pad rolling. They were asking.
Oh yeah, we talked
like about the pads. So that was, I mean, just that they missed it. So, but that was the only thing that I saw more recently. So since I was already asked,
the answer at the moment is no.
Yeah, that's pretty much the end of it. That was the last big question. So
So I just want to let everyone know what we're going to do here is we're going to turn this into a podcast, and then I'll leave it in the link in the description. So, you don't have to, if you're not keen on looking at mine and Tyler's faces for the entire session, you guys can, listen to it in an audio version. But that does it for this stream. And also, thanks to everybody for participating in the giveaway, and a huge thank you to Klaus and Freddie. It's been wonderful to chat with you guys, and this has been a lot of fun. So
likewise.
Outstanding pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.